modern battle tank is an awesome combination of firepower, mobility, and armor protection. Recent developments in ammunition technology, in automatic stabilization and in integrated fire control systems, including a laser rangefinder coupled to the onboard computers, mean that today's tank has an extremely high chance of a first-round hit. Improvements in engines, suspension and transmission systems give the modern tank high speed over rough terrain, while incorporation of passive night vision devices and thermal intensifiers enable it to operate in all weathers by day or by night. Modern tanks keep moving where a four-wheel drive car would become hopelessly bogged down. They can ford water obstacles with little or no preparation. A tank can crush a lesser obstacle with its sheer weight. Almost all modern AFVs, or armored fighting vehicles, are also protected against the hazards of nuclear, biological and chemical warfare. Speed and agility make the modern tank an elusive target, while smoke grenade discharges allow it, if it gets into trouble, to hide itself from the enemy. Armor protection has not been neglected either, for a tank cannot fight unless it can survive. The still secret Chobham armor fitted to the latest British, American and West German tanks makes these machines almost invulnerable to frontal attack. Above all, the modern tank can deliver a terrific punch, which could not have been dreamed of by the original designers in World War I. World War I tanks were slow, cumbersome and had armor protection only against machine gun fire, but their basic concept proved workable. During the years between the world wars, many weird and wonderful designs were developed, some of them combining wheels and tracks to give a good on- and off-road performance. But such machines were too complicated. Gradually, the shape of the modern tank emerged, fully tracked on a low hull with a rotating turret above it. Early AFVs were always compared with the cavalry. The modern concept of the tank was proved by the German Blitzkrieg, or lightning war operations of World War II's early stages, including the conquest of France. The German tanks punched narrow holes through the French front, driving forward remorselessly to complete the total disruption of the French rear areas. As the panzer divisions pressed on, the infantry followed in their wake to mop up and consolidate. Truck-hauled 88mm guns provided potent anti-aircraft defense in their primary role, but also proved to be devastating direct support and anti-tank weapons. The Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers supported the panzer divisions as so-called flying artillery, effectively destroying defenses that might slow the onward rush of the German tanks. The tanks operated by the powers of the Western Alliance were generally inferior to the German tanks at the technical level throughout World War II, though less so at the end than the beginning. The Allies' main advantage was the huge production capacity of the Americans, who only formally entered the war in December 1941, but before then supplied the British with large numbers of tanks. The M3 medium tank was well engineered, but of different design. It was the mechanical basis for the M4 Sherman. This was a good rather than brilliant tank, but was produced in vast numbers and developed in variants optimized for a host of roles. The type was fitted with ever more powerful guns and was available in numbers to swamp the German efforts. The Sherman also paved the way for the first generations of post-war American tanks, such as the M46, the M47 and the M48. The American M60 was, from the late 1950s, one of the principal tanks in NATO's European front line. It carries the British-designed 105mm gun, widely adopted around the world ever since it first appeared in the Centurion. Until the advent of even more powerful and accurate 120mm guns, this was the tank gun against which all others were measured. Being in effect a design of the immediate post-war period, the M60 suffers, by modern standards, from the high silhouette that makes it a vulnerable target, and with maximum armor thickness of only 120mm, it is now considered inadequate against modern anti-tank guns and missiles. Chieftain was the mainstay of the British Army from the early 1970s. Designed to replace the Centurion, which saw so much action around the world from the 1950s, Chieftain was originally intended to be a tank in the 40-ton class. It ended up with a combat weight of 55 tons, which put enormous strain on the engine, and in early exercises resulted in a 90% breakdown rate. Subsequent modifications to the L-60 multi-fuel power pack, as well as to the transmission and suspension, soon improved this, but the engine was a recurrent problem for the British tankmen. In other respects, Chieftain was and still is one of the finest tanks in the world. It has extremely thick and well-sloped armor protection, the driver in the hull front lying in a semi-reclining position to reduce the tank's overall height. The other three crew members, commander, gunner and loader, sit in the turret fighting compartment. The principal feature of Chieftain is his extremely accurate 120mm rifled gun, which can fire a wide variety of different types of ammunition. These include high explosive and squash head rounds, as well as high velocity APDS, armor-piercing discarding sabot, ammunition which in its time was said to be able to knock out any known enemy tank at ranges of over 3,000 yards. The gun is fully stabilized to allow Chieftain to fire with equal accuracy while moving or stationary. Chieftain was phased out of service in the late 1980s. Its combination of good armor protection and hard-hitting gun placed it well to the fore in the NATO front line. The Leopard is one of the most versatile of all tanks since World War II. After this war, American, British and Soviet tank technology was generally tied to the past, but the Germans were able to rebuild from scratch. Germany's experience of armoured warfare was far more extensive than that of the wartime Allies, and the Germans used the experiments and mistakes of both sides to come up with one of the most versatile of all post-war tanks. The Leopard One is of conventional design with hull and chassis surmounted by a fully rotating turret. Like all modern tanks, it has an engine unit which can be removed and replaced in the field, saving invaluable battle time otherwise lost on maintenance. The transmission system is a similar module which can be changed quickly. Main ammunition stowage for 42 rounds of 105mm ammunition is at the front. The gun is the proven British L7, as fitted to so many other post-war AFVs. Further ready-use ammunition storage space is provided in the well-shaped turret. This also incorporates a coaxial and anti-aircraft machine gun. The original Leopard Ones had cast turrets, but after an interim period of adding applique armor plates, these were eventually replaced by a welded design featuring spaced armor. The Leopard One is very much of an all-rounder with high agility and good cross-country handling. After suitable preparations, Leopard Ones can ford rivers up to 13 feet deep, the commander giving the driver instructions from the top of his wading trunk. This is not a new idea, for some panzers were similarly equipped during World War II for the planned invasion of Britain, which never came off, although such tanks did see valuable use later against the USSR. Tract Guards provide extra protection against high-explosive anti-tank rounds. Mud and snow grousers are routinely carried on the glacis plate and can replace the rubber track pads when required. The German army remembers the problems its tanks had during the Russian winters. Both commander and driver have passive light intensifiers which enable them to see clearly by starlight without revealing their own presence to the enemy. Because it weighs only 40 tons, the Leopard One's 830 horsepower engine gives it extraordinary agility and a top speed of over 40 miles per hour. Modern improvements to the fire control equipment, coordinated by a dual-axis mirror system, mean that the tank's gunnery is as accurate by day as it is by night. A laser rangefinder was later retrofitted for a significant improvement to the chances of securing the vital first-round hit. With such a sound basic design, it comes as no surprise to learn that other requirements were foreseen and catered for early in the production program. One of these is a computerized simulator, which allows future Leopard tank drivers to learn their skills without wasting fuel and perhaps knocking down some irate farmer's barn by mistake. A tiny road wheel follows the driver's control movements over a miniaturized landscape, and pictures from a small TV camera on the road wheel show him where he is. This learning process was taken even further with the Leopard Trainer, a turretless tank with a glassed-in superstructure housing the driving instructor. The high cross-country mobility of the Leopard One, coupled to impressive reliability, have resulted in widespread export success to Canada and Australia, as well as several European countries. The 105mm L7 gun is still one of the world's foremost tank busters, even though it has been overtaken by even more powerful pieces.